Welcome back. You're watching Newsx. My name is Vineet. Prime Minister Modi's five-nation tour has started with the first stop in UAE, where energy security has emerged as the biggest focus of the visit. India and the UAE signed major LPG and oil agreements, including a long-term LPG supply deal between Indian Oil and Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Both sides also agreed to expand strategic oil storage in India, giving a major boost to long-term energy cooperation. The timing of these deals is significant. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who is in India for the BRICS foreign ministers meeting, has also reassured India over continued Russian energy supplies. But there is growing uncertainty and concern over possible US sanctions and waiver decisions linked to Russian oil imports. If Washington tightens the sanctions or does not extend waivers, India could face higher oil prices, rising shipping and insurance costs, and possible fuel inflation pressures. That's why New Delhi is now strengthening energy ties with the UAE while also keeping its Russia energy partnership stable. We'll talk about this and a lot more, but first up, joining us on the show is Mr. Hazza Ali Habashi, Harvard scholar. He's joining us live from Abu Dhabi. Hazza, appreciate you joining us. Of course, the India-UAE partnership has seen multiple facets, has seen multiple turns. But the recent one, in light of what's happening internationally with crude oil prices and gas, is a significant one. Do you think that this only goes on to show that India and UAE, both partners in terms of economic prosperity, are also with each other when there is a downturn of events?
Actually, first of all, I would like to say good evening and thank you very much for having me tonight. It is an honor and a pleasure to be with you all. But to address the point what you're saying, to make it more clear for the everyday man, the UAE-India relations is no longer just diplomatic. It has becoming a structure. Energy security, trade logistics, investment, technology, and long-term regional stability are now tied together in a very particular way. Especially after the current MP's visit to the UAE, the CEPA agreement, trade between the UAE and India, across the $100 billion mark. That is not symbolic. That shows both countries are moving from short-term deals to long-term economic integration.
Right. Hazza,
Hello?
yeah. Well, we lost you there in the middle. Go on, Hazza. Obviously, like I said in my opening statement as well, that the relationship between the UAE and India has not been transactional, as Donald Trump, likes to make everything transactional. What do you think is going to come out of this war in terms of how India and the UAE deal with each other?
Well, from my personal experience throughout history reading and my understanding to the current structure and how it's going, short term it's going to be a global stabilization, both from the partnership of UAE and India and how they show classic platform working together. But long term it's going to show more of a unified front against all issues and opposition that can happen and would happen. And at the same time, it has a wonderful message to the world that even though we are separated by borders, we are united by both message and image to what we want and need as a nation and as humanity.
All right. Hazza Ali, appreciate you joining us. Thank you for your time. All right, let me also welcome to the show Ambassador Bhaspati Mukherjee, who is a former diplomat, Major General Sudhakar Ji, geopolitical and senior defense expert, also with us on the program. Last but not the least, Mr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, President of the CDPR, joins us on the program as well. Ambassador Mukherjee, things are not improving. There doesn't seem to be an uptick in terms of the global economic crisis. The tremors of that crisis were also felt in India with oil prices going up. But, India has always been solution-oriented rather than panicking and passing off that panic to its citizens. How is this friendship and that proximity towards the UAE likely to solve our energy problems? Because when you bring in energy from the Emirates, you're obviously, bypassing, not even bypassing, you're not even going near Iran or the Strait of Hormuz.
Thank you, Vineet. Pleasure to be on your program. I think that some very significant decisions have been made, but what was most significant was PM's stopover in UAE on his way to his four-nation European visit. Uh, it demonstrated, as our UAE guest put so eloquently, I have to say, though he's left the program, it demonstrates a, a people-to-people relationship, a relationship that is extremely important to both sides. The agreements which have been made on LPG and oil by one of our major oil companies, Indian Oil, etc., and the strategic reserves being shifted to India is actually provides a short, medium, and long-term solution to efforts being made to blackmail us on this issue. I'm sorry to use strong language, but we are a country growing, a growing country, a growing economy, 1.4 billion people. We cannot be held hostage in this manner. We cannot be threatened in this manner. And this is a solution. And if you look at the optics beneath, what could be better than a situation where our PM is in UAE on his way to meet major founder countries of the European Union, including the Netherlands, where I was ambassador for 3 years. And at the same time, we have the Russian foreign minister and the Iranian foreign minister here. Both have been very reassuring. And at the same time, we are awaiting the final word from the US delegation on what happened in the Trump Xi Jinping talk. So all this has happened in a narrow canvas of 48 hours to 3 days. As far as we are concerned, yes, we have taken a small price rise, not very major. It is an indication that we are not going to allow our oil companies on one hand to get impacted beyond a point. On the other hand, we are going to be very careful that it is not passed down to the consumer. And thirdly, we are going to ensure that our economic growth continues nevertheless. And therefore, this visit, Vineet, and from what I could read of what emanates from it, including the agreements, are extremely important, particularly the whole issue of strategic reserves. These strategic reserves will ensure that if ever, God forbid, such a situation arises again, and I'm sure the whole world is praying it will never happen again, we would not be in a situation where we would have 70 days supply, which we would have much more than that. Because our economy is totally dependent on certain kinds of transport. Let's say you and I are from city of Delhi. Delhi does its business on motorbikes. Everything is done on motorbikes. It's not just a question of using public transport. These are the people who keep the economy going. In Delhi, I can tell you that. But the same thing is equally true in Mumbai and in Kolkata. So we have to just make sure that for the future, quite apart from all the other measures that our Prime Minister has announced and our government is implementing, we have to make sure, Vineet, that we are never put into such a tricky situation again. And Prime Minister's visit to UAE indicates a new front because UAE has left OPEC. So it is free to take decisions without going through OPEC. That opens up a new window of opportunity as far as India is concerned. Vineet.
You're quite right, ma'am. General Sudhakarji, how are you looking at this problem? It's obviously, a time for bonding with our allies who are also energy suppliers to us. But at the same time, how can India better, negotiate this impending energy crisis, which is only going to precipitate as a result of these huge egos of the United States and Iran?
Vinit, good evening. Thank you for inviting me for your show and my very warm regards to distinguished co-panelists. I look at the entire adverse situation as an opportunity, being a military man. And even if we are not looking at it that way, we need to actually channelize our outlook and effort to look at it as a golden opportunity and also calibrate our ecosystem and response metrics for future shocks. Because this is not one of its kind, it is going to happen in this polarized, militarized, and transactional world, given the fact that USA is what it is today with the leadership that we are witness to, his transactional kind of behavior. Now, having said this, allow me to dial a couple of issues because everything depends on what is happening between USA and China. USA and China, to the best of my understanding and take, is that this paradigm of competition versus cooperation. When I say competition, it's a strategic competition as far as USA is concerned. And as far as China is concerned, it is showing the signatures of strategic patience and cooperation. In short, the doctrine which Xi has inadvertently or advertently articulated goes to say that stability through cooperation. Look at China not as a rival but as a partner. That is the outlook which Xi had pointedly mentioned in number of occasions during these 2 days. As against that, America having actually found in short wickets a number of economic issues, I would say they would do well if they have been able to restore some kind of stability to the economic turbulence by virtue of misleading leadership by the president himself that the country has been subjected to. When I talk about economic turbulence, what I mean is that the contract which had been virtually signed and done between China and USA, China was to go in to buy 500 Boeings. It was put under a shutter by virtue of the reciprocal tariff and the number of series of tariffs. Now that it is been undone by the Supreme Court of USA, they have reasons to negotiate and it should have been reopened. Nothing is available in the open source whether this is reopened or not. 400 companies of USA, they used to supply beef to China. That had come under total ban by China by virtue of this reciprocal tariff that I suppose would have been reopened. 25 million metric tons of soybean, which also, as per the traditional practice of China buying from USA, had come under a ban. I suppose it would have been opened for 3 years. This is what the insiders, they have been giving an indication that it would have been opened for soybean, corn, poultry and other agricultural products. So likewise, mineral earth, rare earth elements which had been given a special concession for 1 year, perhaps it would be open for another 1 year, maybe an extension, but that too is at the cost of leverages. As on today, USA has got no leverage against China. China is on a giving mode, USA is on a receiving mode. Therefore, USA willy-nilly, much against the TRA 1979, would have mellowed down and opened up the geopolitical churn for reunification of Taiwan on a platter to China. These are the unfortunate turn of events which are likely to unfold, thereby making me believe that it may not be so abrupt, making me believe that the signatures are pointing towards a bipolar world, much to the dislike of China, because as on today, China is not prepared to accept the role and responsibility of the second pole in the world order. Therefore, will continue to experience the challenges and the opportunities of a multipolar world. So neither multipolarity nor bipolarity will be the new character, new normal, which will continue between competition and cooperation between these two global powers. So
Well
therefore,
said,
how
sir.
does it impact India? It impacts India to an extent that the central spine or the requirement of our economic target of $30 trillion by 2047, with per capita going up from $3,051 as on today to a target of $14,000 to $20,000 by 2047 or earlier than that, it is going to be severely impacted because energy is the central paradigm based on which any economy would grow. Since it has been impacted, UAE is a welcome development, compliments to our leadership, political leadership. The decision has been taken at the right time with the right kind of scaling and diversification. When I talk about diversification, what I mean is it is not only energy, it is technology, it is also talking about the startups. UAE as in today has got a startup culture with 1,57,000 startups. They are well ahead of
Right, sir.
India.
Yeah, right, sir. Let me also rope in Mr. Bhattacharya into this conversation and understand from him also how is he's looking at this situation. Obviously, without getting into the nitty-gritties of what India is likely to gain and likely to lose as a result of this ongoing conflict, Mr. Bhattacharya, we have to also keep into account that India has had a growth trajectory which is likely to get disrupted as a result of this war. How can we blunt that attack on India's growing and promising economy?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that just when we seem to be taking off in what is traditionally called the hockey curve growth, and we had crossed the $2,500 per capita income, which is really the moment when economies break away and start growing at a much faster rate. There have been a series of unfortunate global events, starting from COVID and then the various conflicts that we had, the Ukraine conflict, the Gaza conflict, and now the Iran conflict. All of that is really holding us back in terms of the resources that India needs, which is point one. And as Ambassador Mukherjee mentioned, energy is a very critical component of what resources India requires for powering this growth. And second, access to global markets. The global economy is not growing as fast as it should have been, which means that India is not able to export its goods and therefore not able to leverage the growth that should have happened in order to grow its own economy. In fact, surprisingly, India is the largest contributor of growth to the global economy, and hence we are in a very strange situation where we need to grow and we need resources to do that, as well as we need markets to do that. But all of that is getting constrained because of all the events that are unfolding as we speak. Also, along with it is the shadow of a bipolar world emerging. In fact, about 10-15 years back, the Obama administration themselves had talked about a G2 world where the two is US and China. And 10-15 years later, I think that's unraveling, that's unfolding in front of us, which essentially means that it will happen perhaps at a cost of India's own growth. We have seen umpteen number of times that what China has been doing is to undermine India's growth one way or the other, including dumping of goods into India at prices which are not sustainable, and therefore that's leading to demolition of some of our production capacities. And hence that's a problem, because if we are not able to scale up our manufacturing, then we are leaving out a large part of our growth. Our manufacturing as percentage of our GDP has come down quite significantly. In fact, India is not even taking and imposing anti-dumping duties on many products that are coming in from China. That's also impacting how our manufacturing is playing out in this country. And therefore, if we look overall, we were supposed to have been growing at this stage. We have grown and done extremely well. We've had a very strong leadership, but that leadership is now having to make sure that we are buffeted from the headwinds that we see globally because of the various reasons that the fellow speakers just talked about a little while ago. There are geopolitical developments, there are conflicts, and then there is the sheer dumping of goods into India as one of the largest markets. Now, fortunately, when we look at UAE, naturally UAE has become the third largest trading partner for India. In fact, if you look at it the other way around, India is the second largest trading partner of UAE. In fact, we are the top export market of UAE. So this partnership is almost natural. And what has happened is, because of the conflicts that we see, there has been an acceleration in India and UAE coming together in a much more stronger manner in multiple dimensions, in dimensions of security, in dimensions of energy security, in dimensions of technology, be it supercomputing, be it other kinds of technology. And the fact of the matter is that 40% of UAE's population is of Indian origin. And so there is a strong people-to-people link. There is enormous amount of faith between the two leadership and the two economies, and they're really joined at the hip as we speak. And it has happened almost naturally over the past so many years. And the leaders of the two economies are now taking it further an extremely mutually beneficial manner. It's going to help India defend ourselves from energy insecurity in terms of in times like such as what we are going through right now, and also it's going to give a protective umbrella to UAE. So it's really mutually convenient as we move forward, and that's very, very beneficial for both the economies.
You're quite right. Ambassador Mukherjee, where do you think this war is headed? You know, there seems to be a lull at this point in time, but that lull is not helping things recover. Where do you see this next chapter in this tense face-off, multiple of those between the United States and Iran, will lead us to?
Well, the face-off clearly, Vineet, has not resulted in what Trump wanted, which is, if you recall, I think I was on your program when he said that by tomorrow, I think 9 a.m. Indian Standard Time, he would have destroyed a 5,000-year civilization. That meant use of nuclear weapons, actually, frankly. And my heart really sank, saying, are we on the verge of World War III? We have to give credit to the Iranian people and the government in the manner in which they stood up to this challenge, which was life-threatening. And today, the United States is in a strategic conundrum because it needs a way out. The rising oil prices has not just impacted emerging economies or developing countries. It has impacted the United States in a big way. These are gasoline guzzlers, I remember, during my days of posting in New York. They get majorly upset when fuel prices go up. His MAGA base is getting very uneasy. He needs to find a negotiated solution where he does not lose face. But as far as the Iranians are concerned, they, having stood up to him, now want to extract a price, which is actually against international law, because they want every tanker going through Straits of Hormuz to pay money to Iran. That is not acceptable. It is against the law of the Sea Convention. These are international waters, and it will set a terrible example. For example, if tomorrow it's applied in the Straits of Malacca, etc., etc. So, mediation is the answer. I don't get the impression, I agree with Major General Dagarji, I don't get the impression that there has been any deal worked out between US and China on the Straits of Hormuz. But for that, you would need a direct channel of communication between United States and Iran, which would enable the Iranians to recover from the war. They would need a huge amount of funding, etc. And on the other hand, it would enable Trump to beat a retreat, saying he's won, he's done what he wanted, etc., etc. So under those circumstances, a country like UAE, which hosts American bases, but which has for years shielded Iran against unfair unilateral sanctions, has a major role to play. And we have cultivated UAE strategically for several years now, precisely in order to ensure, on one hand, the 40% Indian population diaspora in UAE are not impacted, and secondly, that we are not impacted majorly by this crisis if it doesn't get resolved over the next 3-4 weeks. And even if it does, Vineet, let's say it gets resolved over the next 1 week. The assessment of most major economists, and I'm sure Dr. Bhattacharya would bear me out, that the impact will take at least 6 months to get over. It's not that simple. when you go in and you destroy an established system, it takes time for things to settle down. So during that time, we would need strategic reassurance, strategic reserves to ensure, on one hand, that our GDP growth is not majorly impacted, on the other hand, to ensure that our economic activity carries on, and, and thirdly, to ensure that the working class, the lower middle class, etc., are not majorly impacted by rising oil prices, which would happen if we are not able to bring things under control over the next couple of weeks. Vineet.
You're absolutely right, ma'am. And we are hoping that the conflict is going to settle down, because then will be the beginning of the road to recovery. We've run out of time. Appreciate everybody who joined in and gave their perspective. We'll take a short break now. Be right back.